Hello, good evening. 3 public forums have been held and still no clear consensus on how best to boost land supply in Hong Kong. But a number of participants made it clear they do not support land reclamation. Not in my backyard. This Lung Kwu Tan villager is worried about potential health impact from land reclamation in Tuen Mun, which already has a landfill and an incinerator. Also, a no from this man who lives in Tsing Yi, another proposed site for reclamation works. If not by producing more land, how about building on existing plots, such as the 172-hectare Fanling Golf Course? Almost 400 people make a living there. So what will happen to us employees? Asked this woman who spent 20 years working at the club. During the 3-hour forum in Yuen Long, a number of people suggested developing military camps or even invoking the Lands Resumption Ordinance. While that will allow authorities to resume private land, former Legislative Council President Zhang Yuk-sing, who's now a member of the Task Force of Land Supply, fears this may induce judicial reviews against the government. With sky-high property prices, this man asked, when will the government be able to turn housing back into a necessity and not a commodity? With just one public forum left, the task force's chairman Stanley Wong stressed all opinions will be considered and reflected to the government.
The police are still investigating the origins of 2 homemade guns seized over the past week in Sham Shui Po and the motive behind the possession of the firearms. As Christy Leung reports, authorities have reassured the public that Hong Kong remains a safe city.
Last month, a fatal shooting at Quarry Bay Park. Then this month, 2 police seizures of homemade guns and ammunition in Sham Shui Po. No signs of a worsening trend was what Li Qihang said on a radio show this morning. The police force's director of crime and security stressed Hong Kong has a rigid gun control policy, even though just a few days ago 2 Bangladeshi men were arrested in Sham Shui Po on suspicion of unlawful possession of a gun. He said a task force was set up in 2017. Its focus is on any suspicious or illegal activities in non-Chinese communities. A lawmaker thinks that's not enough.
We must treat it as a very great alarming signal. We must enhance our intelligence gathering possibilities and review how we can cover comprehensively, including certain small groups or groups which we have not been targeted before.
He added that some guns were found when police stopped and searched people on the streets, which reflected the seriousness of the issue. Christy Leung, TVB News.
30 flights between Hong Kong and Japan have been affected. And up until 5 p.m, the airport authority said 28 flights have been delayed and 2 cancelled. The flights were between Hong Kong and Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, as well as Fukuoka. Travellers are reminded to check their latest flight arrangements.
European Union monitors have slammed Pakistan's disputed general election for its lack of equality. That's after the country's former ruling party conceded defeat to former cricket star Imran Khan yesterday. Tens of thousands of people who supported smaller parties are threatening nationwide protests unless the entire election is rerun. It was a bitterly fought general election that was largely aimed at preventing jailed former leader Nawaz Sharif's Pakistan Muslim League from returning to power due to years of alleged corruption. But the country's new leaders may have come to power under equally dubious circumstances. Former world champion cricketer Imran Khan's path to power has been plagued by accusations that it is among the dirtiest ever, said to be characterized by attempts to manipulate the outcome, including silencing the media and intimidating candidates. The EU Election Observation Mission initially noted the election showed improvements over the 2013 vote, saying overall the election results are credible. But in a preliminary report issued later on Friday, the mission backtracked and said the electoral process was not as good as the 2013 election. The report also said campaign week was marred by a lack of equality that meant the playing field was anything but level. The US State Department agreed with the EU's conclusions that positive changes to the election framework were overshadowed by restrictions on freedom of expression and unequal campaign opportunities. In his victory speech on Thursday, Khan offered to investigate opposition allegations of vote rigging, adding that he wanted to unite the country under his leadership. Khan's Pakistan Justice Movement, or PTI party, won 114 of 269 seats in the National Assembly. The Pakistan Muslim League Party, led by Nawaz Sharif's younger brother Shahbaz, took 63 seats. But since he fell short of the 137 seats needed for a majority in parliament, Khan needs to form a government with small coalition partners. That could prove to be a challenge, as smaller parties such as the Islamist coalition United Council of Action, which boasts tens of thousands of supporters, vowed to launch protests and boycott parliament. Sharif, who still rejected the results despite conceding defeat, said he would consult his Pakistan Muslim League before taking such action.
The American economy grew by 4.1% in the second quarter, its fastest pace in nearly 4 years. US President Donald Trump jumped on the data, declaring victory for his economic and trade policies. Alan Buckner reports.
The 4.1% growth rate is the strongest performance since the third quarter of 2014, and first quarter growth was revised to 2.2%, up from 2%.
During each of the two previous administrations, we averaged just over 1.8% GDP growth. By contrast, we are now on track to hit an average GDP annual growth of over 3%, and it could be substantially over 3%. Each point, by the way, means approximately $3 trillion and 10 million jobs. Think of that.
The figures show households bought more cars, spent more on healthcare, utilities, food, and accommodation.
If economic growth continues at this pace, the United States economy will double in size more than 10 years faster than it would have under either President Bush or President Obama.
But economists generally expect growth to slow down in the coming months, in part because of a one-time rush by farmers to export soybeans ahead of tariffs that took effect in July.
When the retaliatory tariffs that China will place on U.S. agricultural goods take effect, then we're going to see a rapid drop off, and that could turn out to be problematic.
Rosenberg also notes the growth came in the wake of a one-off $1.5 trillion tax cut package.
Because it's also done a cut in taxes without a huge increase in revenues will and has increased the government deficit, which needs to be covered by borrowing. So if growth at a fairly high sustained rate is not forthcoming, the deficit will continue at a high rate and the debt will continue to increase.
There was other positive data that shows Americans are saving more, giving them more room to spend. But the optimistic picture depends in part on whether trade conflicts the Trump administration has pursued with major trading partners end up weakening the economy. Alan Buckner, TVB News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's ready to invite US President Donald Trump to Moscow and is ready to visit Washington if conditions are right. Putin's comments came during a briefing at the summit of BRICS countries in South Africa. They follow the White House backing off of Trump's suggestion that Putin could visit Washington this autumn to follow up on their summit in Helsinki. Trump was widely criticized at home for appearing to have accepted Putin's claim that Russia did not meddle in the 2016 US election. Putin said he is prepared to go to Washington if the appropriate conditions for work are created.
A fast-growing wildfire in Northern California has killed a second firefighter after high winds drove the flames into the city of Redding. Fires in the scenic Shasta Trinity area erupted into a firestorm on Friday. The fire then jumped across the Sacramento River and swept into the western side of Redding, destroying scores of buildings. The city is home to about 90,000 people. Mass evacuations are underway as the inferno poses a serious threat to thousands of dwellings and businesses. Firefighters and policemen have gone into life safety mode, hustling door to door to usher residents out of harm's way.
Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras took political responsibility for a wildfire near Athens that killed at least 87 people. This as the opposition went on the offensive on Friday following 3 days of mourning. They accused the government of failing to protect their lives and for not apologising. In a bid to deflect public anger, Tsipras told ministers he was conflicted over whether the authorities had done everything right in response to the disaster. He said he would take full political responsibility for the tragedy. The country's civil protection ministers said the government suspected arson was behind Monday night's blaze, which trapped dozens of people in their cars while they were trying to escape a wall of flames.
Unseasonal storms brought heavy rainfall and strong hail to Paris yesterday. Local residents and motorists waded through flooded streets as hail followed thunderstorms. That's as the French capital has been on alert as an ongoing heatwave broke weather records this week. Adding to the woes, all train services were suspended in the city's Montparnasse railway station. That was because of a fire at a major electrical transformer. The suspension affected the holiday plans of hundreds of Parisians coming on a major holiday departure date.
下星期日本 shopping 好唔好？
好。
咁我哋今晚食泰菜好冇？
好啊。
咁你飲咩都冇所謂㗎。
飲乜嘢都冇所謂。飲嘢飲得咁冇所謂，我諗我要重新考慮我哋嘅關係。Fuse 檸檬茶推出全新酒糖口味不特止，仲有埋原味、半糖3種甜度任我揀，我梗係揀我最中意嘅酒糖啦。如果你都係唔知我講咩嘅話，我唔怕話埋俾你知。Fuse 檸檬茶仲有3重茶底，包括伯爵紅茶、錫蘭紅茶同阿薩姆紅茶撞埋一齊，呢個配搭襯過我同你啊！
小姐，你嘅全新酒糖 Fuse Tea。Fuse
Tea 3重茶底檸檬茶，3種甜度任你揀。
Welcome back. A weekend finale for street buskers and performers at the Mong Kok pedestrian zone. But they're going out with standing room only crowds. Pinky Wong has that story.
It's goodbye for now as street performers stage their final shows in Mong Kok.
We have been here for 14 years. We have relationship and connection with the labor here.
A full house as the curtain falls along Sai Yuen Choi Street South. A bittersweet goodbye as the pedestrian zone will officially close on August 4th. The Yau Chim Mong District Council voted to close the zone for good 2 months ago because of noise complaints made by nearby residents and shop owners. I can finally have a good sleep, said Mrs. Wong. 18 years ago, the road closure was for traffic reasons. Since then, it has become a popular public space for those who wanted to put on a show. Next week, the road will be reopened.
Most performers said they won't give up performing and will move to other public places in Tsim Sha Tsui and Causeway Bay.
Hopefully less complaints from residents here, said this guy, an 8-year veteran of the Mong Kok scene. He's moved to Tsim Sha Tsui. But already, the shop owner in TST worries about the customers if too many performers get the same idea. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
7 people were injured after 2 high-speed boats collided in the waters of Yongshou Wan on Lama Island today. They were rushed by a fireboat to a clinic on the island. 3 of them later ferried back to the Hong Kong China Ferry Terminal and were taken to Ratchangi Hospital and Pamela Yud Nethersole Eastern Hospital. Police received a report about the collision at around 1 p.m. Of the 7 victims, 2 were men who suffered head and leg injuries. The 5 female victims fell into the sea following the collision, but were rescued with only minor injuries.
A 58-year-old man from the mainland drowned while swimming at Long Kei Wan in Sai Kung today. The victim was airlifted to Pamela Yud Nethersole Eastern Hospital by the government flying service. This after the police received a report at around noon that a swimmer was in distress. The man was later certified dead in hospital.
Nowadays, there's an app for almost everything, and now there's one that aims to talk you out of committing suicide. Pinky Wong has more.
A suicide prevention group said almost 3 people took their own lives every day in the city last year. The coroner's court ruled more than 900 deaths as suicides. The Samaritan Befrienders Hong Kong provides counseling services, but it's concerned about troubled elders who may not want to seek help.
Elderly people have the thoughts that it's not too good to ask for help when they think that it will kind of create a kind of burden to others. That's why they do not call our hotline.
But a more alarming problem is the dramatic increase of young people who chose to end their lives. Last year, 36 people under 19 years old killed themselves. That was a 50% jump from the year before. The charity group says most of the young people who called wanted to discuss family and school problems. The youngest caller was just 7 years old. To boost its online presence, the group will launch a mobile application next month where volunteers will provide free and confidential chat services. Peng Wong, TVB News.
Overseas again, one of Asia Pacific's largest Air Force training exercises has got underway over Australia's northern coastline. The city of Darwin is playing host to 4,000 personnel and 140 aircraft from around the world during the 3-week-long exercise Pitch Black. The biannual exercise began in 1990 between Australia and Singapore. This year, 16 countries are taking part in the event, including Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Canada, France, India, Japan, and several other Asian nations. The drill enables different nations a chance to learn from each other and improve their force integration. And finally, stargazers gathered overnight to watch the longest lunar eclipse of the 21st century. They were also treated to a rare sight when the eclipse coincided with a Mars opposition.
Citizens gathered by the Victoria Harbour last night as a total lunar eclipse illuminated the local skyline. Some of them even brought along their astronomical telescopes for a more spectacular view of the moon. The lunar phenomenon, also the second of its kind this year, began at 1:13 this morning. At 3:30 a.m., the moon started to display a copper-red hue, transforming into what is known as the blood moon. The entire process lasted 104 minutes, marking it the longest total lunar eclipse of the century. But there was more to it. What added to the rarity was the simultaneous occurrence of a Mars opposition, which took place from Friday 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. today. Mars opposition refers to the alignment of Mars, the Earth, and the Sun, during which the red planet appears the biggest and brightest as its proximity to the Earth becomes the closest. The phenomenon appears every 15 to 17 years. Those who missed out this time may try again in 2035. However, Chan Cheng Lam, assistant curator of the Hong Kong Space Museum, said there was no evidence supporting the joint reoccurrence of a total lunar eclipse and a Mars opposition in the next few 100 to 1,000 years. Kana Chu, TVB News.
And that's the news.
Thanks for watching.